Welcome to AI in Real Life, real talk with real experts, brought to you by the AI Institute for Societal Decision Making. I'm Katy, your host and an undergraduate at Carnegie Mellon University. Today, we're on site at the inaugural AI SDM workshop, exploring the role of AI in disaster response and emergency management. In this episode, I'm joined by two incredible experts who are leading key initiatives within the AI SDM Institute. Dr. Robin Murphy, who is the Raytheon Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University and the thrust leader for the Disaster Management Thrust at AISDM. Dr. Terri Adams is a Professor of Sociology and Criminology at Howard University. She serves as the co-leader of the Disaster Management Thrust at AISDM. Together, we'll explore the intersection of AI, robotics, and human decision-making and disaster response, including the challenges and opportunities that lies ahead. Thank you both for joining us today. And then before we dive into our discussion, I would like to give you two some chance to introduce yourself. So first, Robin, could you tell us a bit about your background or lines of research?
Well, I'm Robin Murphy. I specialize in artificial intelligence for robotics, but specifically for disasters. I helped create the field of disaster robotics, and I tell people I've been in 31 disasters not of my own making, where we've deployed ground robots, aerial robots, and even marine-based robots to things like Hurricane Ian, Fukushima Daiichi, those types of things, starting with 9/11.
That's fascinating. And then Dr. Terri, could you tell us a bit about your journey and your lines of research?
I guess I would just succinctly say that I focus on decision making during disasters. I've done quite a bit of work looking at how first responders manage in the midst of a crisis, looking at both some of their personal challenges as well as organizational challenges. And I am currently looking at some of the societal impacts as it relates to climate change in addition to this work.
Got it. Great. It's fascinating to hear about both of their background. And as we have two experts here today, one in disaster robotics and another in the human behavior during crisis, I'm curious, what have been the most unexpected challenges that you guys have faced when implementing AIs or robotics in the real world disaster situation? I'd love to hear both of your response. Maybe Robin can start first.
You know, if you had told me after 9/11, when small ground robots were used for the first time for any type of response, and they were there from the first day on, incredibly useful, even though there was no one to find alive, if you had told me then that they still would not be, as of today, part of FEMA's required, you have to have robots with you for a building collapse to go into the rubble, or that after Hurricane Katrina, the first use of small drones, that still to this day, they're not required for they're not even funded for a federal response. I would laugh at you because they're so useful. They add so much value to the emergency responders. And yet, as a society, we haven't quite gotten the regulations and the funding and the permissions for the agencies to actually use them. So that's been the biggest shock, not the technology, but all that socio-technical kind of stuff that goes along with it.
Got it. And then for Terri?
So I don't have the experience that Robin has, but what I would say is I think part of the challenge that she's talking about are cultural shifts in decision making as it relates to emergency management.
Oh, got it. Could you give an example of?
Well, I think just the idea of using robotics needs to be seriously considered and into the planning phases of emergency decision making. But people often rely on what they know has worked in the past without thinking about what new tools could be used to improve decision making.
Got it. Thank you so much. And then, Robin, I've read your work, and then I saw that your analysis have shown that 50% of the terminal failures in disaster robotics are due to human error. So can you explain what this error typically involves and how AI or robotics might be used to address these issues?
Well, some of that human error is the human error of the designer, because if you look at mining disasters, they use these big robots, but you're going, say, like 2 miles in, and you're in a place that's not very friendly to wireless communication. So you're running a tether, fiber optic. Well, those are pretty fragile. So it's pretty easy if you're trying to move this big device around to run over and break your fiber optic tether. Now you've lost communication. So that's considered, from an engineering perspective, a human error. The operator was not able to keep up with where the tether was, and the tether retracting reel, they never work the way they're supposed to. Again, that's an operator. But yet, if you start looking at the work in cognition and cognitive load, first off, you take David Woods' work is that, so you're the operator, you're working at something like through a soda straw worth of the camera. So you've got a mediated event. Then you're looking at the work of Ranjana Mehta and Camille Perez, where people, this is an off-normal, an unusual case. So your blood pressure's up, you're stressed, you're this, you're already going to an emergency. You're under these abnormal conditions, and you haven't had a lot of sleep because you had to get there and stuff. So you're already cognitively impaired, and yet somehow this is their fault. It's like, dudes, make the robot smarter, make it keep up, give us better displays, fix the darn reel. Maybe let's do a little bit, shielding the fiber optic cable, or those things. So that's the type of human error, and that's when we start seeing where the AI comes in. Is that AI can help you when you're cognitively fatigued. So we're not looking at to replace the operator, but make it more like riding a horse. You don't tell the horse, hoof up, hoof down, hoof up, hoof down. You go faster, that way, faster, slower. And of course, in all the movies, I'm from Texas, right? The horse is always smarter than the cowboy, right? Because there's like a snake or something. That's the kind of thing we want to see with AI. We want it to make that human AI teaming, not replacing so much as working together and both bringing it together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And exactly to your point, and human AI teaming, I think trust might be a very key things that people may think about. And then how can human and AI build trust between each other, and how can the AI system, especially during this high stress disaster situation, and what ethical considerations come into when we have the AI human teaming?
Okay. And I think it's based on a number of things. I think one, to increase trust, you have to make people more familiar with the technology. I think you have to expose what are some of the limitations, so that transparency is important. And I think that we need to, people also want to know what are the ethical considerations. So are there any biases that are built into the use of the technology, and how can it better facilitate the work that they're doing without replacing them? Yeah, I think that's key. I think one of the number one concerns, at least from the data that we've been looking at from a study that I just ran, is that people are highly concerned that AI is going to replace their jobs. Yeah. So of course you're going to have immediate pushback because people don't want to be replaced. That's a natural phenomena. But educating people more, getting them more familiar, being transparent, I think all of these things could help increase trust in the use of AI.
Yes, and that actually brings us to the question about how can we make human and AI effectively work together in a disaster situation. Maybe Terri can start by discussing how human responders might adapt to working alongside AI.
I think once you get people acclimated to the idea of it and how it can help them,
Yes.
and if you can have them in scenario-based training that really mimics the real world, as Robin mentioned earlier, these are highly stressful situations, and often in highly stressful situations, people rely on muscle memory, what they know has worked in the past. So instituting a new tool in the midst of that is going to complicate things for them.
Yes.
But if you can get them trained and aware of use cases that has actually helped first responders, and they can see the evidence of that work, I think they would be more than willing to start implementing that. But it can't be in real time, we're just using it. And it can't be that they're training on tabletop exercises. It has to really mimic real life.
Yes. Got it. Yeah, and for Robin, maybe you can add your thoughts on what's on the robot sides, what's needed for the robots or AI to become more effective teammates.
Well, exactly the same thing. What Terry said is that you can't. Uh, not only do you not want the humans to be working in a low fidelity, physical and operational fidelity scenario, you've got to have realistic conditions. So we'll get people to build a robot. Oh, my robot's been a revolution. How do we go through rubble or fly through indoors? And it's like, okay, great. What does it do when it's wet? By the way, if the building collapses, all the water from the sprinkler systems, the sewage systems, the bathrooms, the water fountains, that's going places, right? All the sheetrock and concrete. Now it's like all slurry and terrible. All right, so you get that. So have you ever tried that? Well, no, but it can't be waterproof. That's expensive or hard. It's like, well, that's a non-starter, right? And then you start trying to test with that. And then it's like, well, you actually need to be able to run for 12 hours at a time. That's what I'm saying. You got to be carried, right? So how am I carrying, look at me. If I can't carry it out there with all my safety gear. And the favorite one is like, that's nice. How am I controlling that with gloves on? My safety gloves. Pouty. Yeah, it's like, but no, that's part of the training that you want to do on the design. And then this thing, with that same thing with the human in there. How does this work as a system? And I think one of the things in education we kind of get into, everybody gets very focused at a particular algorithm or a particular component, and they forget the system. And there's always a human in that system somewhere. Even though it's an AI system, there's a person there somewhere.
Got it. And then building on that, what are you guys' thoughts on like how the roles of humans should retain versus the role that AI robots can take over during the disaster response? Maybe Robin, you can think about what tasks do you see as the most suitable for like robotics to take, and what might be like not replacing human but help human to like work better in the disaster.
Robots don't replace people in disasters, so it's always complementary. For right now, we're in the middle of our colleagues down at Florida State are deployed as they lead the drone teams for all the state of Florida, and we just had Hurricane Helene hit. So they're using small drones. Well, there's lots of helicopters in this world, satellites, but they don't have the same coverage as being able to, this neighborhood's very vulnerable. We got to check it out.
Yes.
So you got small drones doing things, not displacing helicopter pilots because they're all pulling people off of buildings and things. Okay, so they're not replacing people in the least. Now, they got the drones. If you have 16 to 18 to 20 drone teams, you're talking on the order of 60 gigabytes of imagery to see not just who is hurt, but what's the damage? Is it an entire neighborhood? Is that? So now that what they're doing is they're taking it and usually it takes about 3 days for one person, a couple of analysts to figure out 4 minutes per image, big ortho. So a neighborhood to count the damaged building, rated according to the standard methodologies. And whereas the second question you want is not how bad everything's damaged, is how am I going to get people there, the responders there? What's the damage of the roads? So having that computer vision machine learning system to do the building and road damage assessment, fantastic, right? It's a complement to what the responders are doing and something you could never do.
Robin, can you give us an example about like some recent disasters that you actually apply those like robotics into the disaster management?
Well, I'll tell you about one that I didn't deploy robots for, but I was very proud the FBI deployed robots. And so everybody here, you're thinking of like that big bridge collapse where the barge hit it in Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, drones, that's the number one thing. And you're like, no, they've actually have binoculars and helicopters there. The big thing is what's under the water.
Yes.
Right? And you can't, and that kind of debris and stuff, it's unethical to send a human diver in. They have to be very careful because they can get trapped. They're this, you've got currents, all that.
Right.
ROVs. And we're talking, things like that's really, the size of a suitcase. It's square. They're not very aerodynamic looking. but they're like a Doppler, right? They go down, they look, you've got sonar, you've got cameras, manipulators and stuff. You can start poking around and seeing that, but they're tethered, which means you've got perfect communication. And if the current gets really, you can always bring them back into there. And so they've just become a basic tool. And we saw them used heavily by the Navy for the Haitian earthquake. Earthquake happens in a small country. You can't get enough relief supplies through the airport, even if you fix the runway. It's got to be through the water, right? Through your shipping. But you've got an earthquake, so that means everything under the water may have shifted. So you got to check it. So how to do it fast? Go marine-based robots.
As we know that disaster happen like different places on the world may have like very unique aspect of each of them, which can be like very specialized to like each different circumstances. And I wonder in the AI system, like what part should be can able be like generalizable, and what part can we have to like specialize it for the typical like certain for the special circumstances?
Sure. I'll let Robin answer the technical piece of this, but I would say even though each disaster is unique in and of itself, there are some common elements. You're going to have flooding, potential flooding issues. You're going to have sometimes fire. You're going to have fallen debris. You're going to have buildings in distress. You're going to have humans in distress. So there's some enough common elements where I think developing a tool that can apply to addressing each of those things within the unique circumstances is possible.
Yeah, and it's what you want to do. There's another aspect to this, though, that's a little more subtle, of that idea of generalization versus specialization. Where's the money coming from? So it turns out the drones that have just revolutionized how we do search and rescue at the state level, the various states can do it. These little drones are $1,000 to $3,000. You could buy them off of Amazon. You can buy them out of petty cash for most counties versus, $100,000 drones or $30,000 drones. So they're not exactly perfect, but they're pretty darn good. For $1,000, you can figure out how to make it work. Okay, and the nice thing, that's again where AI comes in. So it's not quite perfect here, but we can fix stuff on the back end. Getting it in the hands and use something that's cheap, effective, you're not worried about losing it because it's not that expensive. That turns out to be a big win, and AI can help support by fixing any downstream problems.
Got it.
Or do as fast.
Yes. This sounds amazing. And then Terri, can you add on what are the humans aspect? Like how should the human element be preserved to maintain an effective response to disaster?
I was just thinking about Robin's response, and what she just described is that they're humans using the tools to help improve decisions that they would need to make and actions that they would need to take. So if you could use a tool that can minimize your wading through the data in a matter of minutes versus hours and days, it makes sense to use that. Yes. But I think there's certain types of decisions that need to be made that should be relied on just humans. First responders know their communities. They know the needs of their people. And I don't think, at least at this moment in time, that there are any tools that can replace that.
Yes, it's definitely a very important thing to take care of. And then looking ahead, what advancement in AI and robotics are you guys both most excited about in the field for disaster management? And then Robin, you can maybe start from the technological angle about like what are the technologies?
Well, I think, and this just builds again on Terri was saying, is that there's the decisions really turn out to be made by the humans. Right. I mean, when you have the human thing, AI is actually think of the decision of where to deploy responders, or who gets what water, which neighborhood gets the water and food first, or where are we setting up emergency shelters. Those are important decisions with a huge set of factors of which we're still trying to figure out, which is another role of AI to help us mine and determine what those are, because people are bad at articulating. You ask them a question, put a microphone in front of you, they'll forget how. So you're looking at those type of techniques to help, and think of those decisions not as one decision, but as, well, I've decided to get information from that group, and I need to get the GIS people the maps, and I need to do, oh my gosh, I forgot about the vulnerability maps, the demographics, and I should call so-and-so because the meteorology people said they'd give me a meteorologist and they'll tell me what it's going to be in 2 days from now.
Right.
So all of that, that's a great thing to forget in the middle of a disaster, but it's a great thing for AI to remember. And so the decision making is really helping humans make the decision. And that's the technology that excites me, is enabling the right information to get to the right person at the right time to make that right decision for do the best for all of us.
And also, when we're thinking about like disasters, what we're currently talking about are all like after a disaster happens, how can we like fix it? And then, which is like an immediate, which short-term step. But we also know that after the disasters, human may also have traumas or other like emotional, psychological issues from that. And how can AI or robotics helps in terms of resolving that part?
Well, to try to answer your question, I would say that there are some scholars that are developing tools to help people deal with depression and various types of psychological issues. There's someone at my university, Dr. Gloria Washington, who's doing a number of very interesting projects, but she's working on something in particular that might be relevant or useful to this discussion. She has developed a tool to help people deal with imposter syndrome. So it's a tool in which they can log on and actually talk to an artificial person about a particular experience.
Wow.
So I don't know the mechanics behind it, but I do know it's exciting work. And I think while a tool like that could be helpful, particularly when people are embarrassed, a number of first responders, particularly police officers, are actually embarrassed to reach out for help. So I've talked to a number of people that said that, their police departments provided psychological support, and they did it when it was a part of a team, talking after an incident and working through those issues. But when the help relied on them going to someone, they're very reluctant to do that, I should say. And so having a tool in which they could use potentially at home in the privacy of their house, I think that could be useful.
Got it. Robin, do anything?
Yeah, Cindy Bethel's looked at that too, because we saw that after 9/11. And of course, you typically only accept therapy from someone who knows what you do. So, I mean, now you have to have a therapist who's also a firefighter, who has also been in a terrible event. It just kind of falls apart pretty quick. We saw this happen a little bit as well after the big Japanese tsunami.
Yes.
And so our Japanese colleagues were there, and we helped them with the water-based robots as well. But it turned, so you're hitting 400 miles of coastline, a lot of it very rural, a lot of with older population, and now totally cut off. All the train bridges were gone in there. And so what do you do with all those people who are alone and isolated? And so they were sending, they had teenage girls who were basically doing their big projects to go out and talk and ZVAN and trying to set up the communications to be the therapist. And then the Japanese have also looked at these robot animals. Just they're not very animal-y, but they're warm and they vibrate. And you can pet them, and it can add just that little sense of comfort, which even though you think that seems kind of silly to have a little warm vibrating kind of toy that's there, it's going to be and can look in, it seems kind of dumb, but yet it works. And so those are some things.
You might think that it's crazy,
Right.
but actually the sale of stuffed animals went up exponentially during COVID.
Oh,
Why? Because people needed something to comfort. Yes, right? So if a stuffed animal can comfort you, certainly a robot that can mimic a pet could potentially comfort you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that sounds exciting. And then for Terri,
I would just add that I think what I get excited about is the idea of it helping to reduce the cognitive load on the first responders and to help improve their overall mental health in the midst of a disaster and then after. Yeah.
Is there any like social implications that you can see of all those like emerging technologies in disaster management? And then
Yes.
like what do you both see as like limitation or limiting factors that this holding back the further progress? And
I guess, with the continuing warming of the planet and the fact that we're seeing an increase in maybe not necessarily the number of storms, but the intensity of them and the frequency of the huge once in 100-year storms.
I see.
I think more and more people are going to be impacted, but we tend to rely on the same people, first responders, to respond to those incidents. So I think anything that we can do to minimize the load on them, to help improve their lives, I think is vitally important. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about, because I think we rely on them, but we don't think of them as people. We don't think about the after effects or the long-term impacts. And that's something that I've done, over the course of some of the work in my career.
Yeah, got it. And then just for a wrap up, what is one key takeaway that you guys hope that our listeners gain from our conversation today about the role of AI in the disaster management? Feel free to like reflect on something that the other have mentioned that resonate with you.
For me, it's that the robots and AI aren't replacing people. They're like fire trucks. You wouldn't say a fire truck is replacing a firefighter or running in and saving a life, and still the firefighters. So the same thing with the responders. We're building tools for them to use, smart tools, because it's an incredibly hard process, very stressful, very cognitively challenged, very rare, very unusual. Every event is different. So you need to have the AI tools.
Yes. And just adding on to what Robin said, I can't really say it any better, what she just said, but I think just it's important for people to understand that at the end of the day, it's going to be people making the decisions and that they're just using the tools. And I think once we can get people to understand that, there'll be more acceptance of it and more integration of it in emergency management.
Got it. Thank you both so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. To our listeners who wants to learn more, you can find additional resources and information on our website at www.cmu.edu/AI-SDM. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more discussions on how AI is shaping society. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you join us next time on AI in Real Life, Real Talk with Real Experts.